I'm going to be using certain herbs such as oat stroke. Oat straw. I'm going to be using red clover. We're going to be using nettles and red clover and peppermint and some plantain or marshmallow, as well as licorice root. Every one of them has a function, and I'm going to talk about every one of them. The interesting thing is, you might ask, hey Magdalena, so what's the one thing, what's good about marshmallows for hormones, right? Or what does peppermint do for hormones? And I want to, if you follow my work for a while, then you kind of know that I like to look at things a little bit more upstream, meaning what has caused your hormonal imbalance in the first place. It's not your hormone, it's not your endocrine glands itself, it's all the imbalances that we'll be facing on a daily basis. They bring us into this point. And what I have found also is that most women who have hormonal problems have it not because it has something happened in the past 2 weeks, 2 months, but oftentimes it's something that you've been doing for the past 10 years, 15 years. And nutritional depletion is one of the big problems. Think of nutritional depletion as in the raw ingredients that are needed in order to make something out of it. So for example, like if you have a cake and you need all the different ingredients to make it work, right? And hold it, and so it works together, and there's not too much and too little of the different ingredients. I feel like with human nutrition is the same thing. And so, so why don't we just get started? And the tea that I'm gonna be making, it's a highly, actually I just boiled the water so we don't need to boil it again. The nutritive tea is I have to give credit to Paul Bergner, who is the founder of my school. That I'm training currently to become a certified herbalist with the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism. He's the original founder of the school. He was the one who invented this tea. And I have to tell you, I've been drinking it every day. You're gonna drink this like every day, about a cup or so, cup and a half. You don't need a lot of it because we're gonna be making a true herbal infusion in a therapeutic sense. It's a hugely medicinal drink, but it's got to be strong. It's not gonna be one of your, you dip a tea bag in a hot water kind of a thing. No, this is gonna be, we're gonna be using proper herbal proportions to making a medicinal tincture. And for that to happen is herbalists used 1:30 proportion. Which goes to 1 gram to 30 milligrams of liquid, in this case is water, right? So it can get kind of complicated, especially if you don't use the matrix system. So I just made it really simple for you, and that's why the recipe is gonna be posted. If you guys are watching on Instagram, just go to hormonesbalance.com and look at the latest recipe that we posted, is the nutritive tea. So without further ado, why don't we just get going? The first ingredient that you will see on the recipe is oat straw. Oat straw is incredibly nutritive. It contains high amounts of magnesium, calcium, potassium, a lot of different trace minerals as well, which is something I'm going to talk about in our next call, how important trace minerals are. Here's the kicker. I realized actually I ran out of oat straw, and so I'm not gonna have it here. So I'm gonna substitute. That's what I want to talk a little bit about, substitutions. By the way, if you make your tea, like this is a large jar that I have at home because that way I don't have to blend it every time. This is the blend I like, and this is the blend that follows the recipe. And then we can just, from there on, you can just just use whatever's needed. So the oat straw, and for those of you who are watching on Facebook, I'm just gonna do a zoom in. If you do see a little bit of straw, it really, as the name implies, it really is a straw, And for the Instagrammers, if you can't see what I'm showing in too much detail, don't worry about it. It's basically a straw. It's a little different from oat milk tops. Those will be a nervine, and they will be very calming and kind of put you to sleep. What we want is oat straw and not the milky oats, which is the tops, okay? So it's the straw, not the tops. Okay, so what I've decided to do, since I don't have oat straw, what I'm gonna substitute it with is gotu kola. Gotu kola is also highly nutritious, but is also a nervine, it's also an adaptogen. So it supports the whole nervous system in a fantastic way. Now, the recipe calls for half a cup, let me take a look, for half a cup of oat straw. So I'm substituting that with, and by the way, all of those measurements are to 4.5 cups of filtered water. And that's to give you basically a quart of the medicinal tea. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a little bit more because this jar is much bigger. I'm using a Pyrex. Notice this, I'm not using any plastic container. You always want to use glass for things like that. This has got up to 8 cups, so I can actually technically double. You don't want to be making too much of this tea because it is gonna kind of like wither even in the fridge. So you want to infuse it for the 8 to 12 hours. I'm gonna talk about this in a second, and then strain it. You want to strain it. You don't want to have the herbs, the plant material in it, and then from there on you can put it in the fridge and then consume it within 3 to 4 days. Okay, so I'm gonna use slightly more than half a cup of gotu kola, and if you're joining in late, I'm using gotu kola as a replacement for oat straw, otherwise you want that. And many of you always ask me, where do I get my herbs from? So Jean, maybe if we can post the name. So many of them are like that one just now that I used. This is from Star West, and I get that on Amazon. I love those brands because they're all organic. The other one is from Frontier. All these very flashy bags are. I use so many herbs that I don't even put them in containers. I have some containers, but these ones are big bags. I just don't have space for them. So this is from Frontier Co-op, and again, you can get that on Amazon. All right. So the second ingredient we want to look at is stinging nettles. And for those of you who are in luck and you have fresh stinging nettles growing right now, because as I'm recording this, we are in spring, stinging nettles are amazing. We're going to be using half a cup. So again, I'm going to be using slightly more than that. Here's the thing. If you're harvesting nettles, please do so now in spring and not later, because if you harvest them too late, you're going to end up having a lot of digestive problems and like a piercing, prickly feeling when you're urinating. I never knew why that happens sometimes to some people, and I was accused of promoting things that are highly dangerous. And then turned out that actually this person must have picked her nettles too late, too late in the summer, and that's why they developed that. So what's amazing about nettles, and for those of you who are on Facebook, I'm just gonna do a close up here. Just beautiful herb. It's just like, oh, it's just even the smell is just so like, green. And so what's amazing about nettles, and who knows what nettles are good for? If you do, just post your comment and let me know, what do you know about nettles? And while I'm waiting for your comments, I'm gonna move on to the next one just to see how much you guys, because many people know nettles and maybe had an experience of using nettles. I have certainly use nettles in my herbal program, Herbs for Balance, for those of you who've done it. And I know people who take nettles have incredible benefits from that. So the next ingredient that we want to look into is red raspberry leaf. And you might have heard of red raspberries. So raspberries, as nasty as they are, right? For those of you who have them in the garden, you know how they can just completely take over everything. We're gonna be using just 1/4 of a cup. The reason why I'm using 1/4 of a cup of red raspberry leaf is because it is a really astringent herb. Now, it has a special efficacy, so I'm gonna use kind of a generous, because as you know, I'm doing a little bit more than the measurements, because I'm gonna use like quart and a half of water. So red raspberry leaves is literally the leaves of the red raspberry, right? And what's amazing about it is that it has an affinity. Different herbs have different affinity for different body organs. Red raspberry has a special affinity for the uterus, okay? So women who are suffering from lack of periods, too heavy periods, who don't have their periods, have irregular periods, red raspberry is almost like a adaptogen, if you will, for the reproductive organs. And I coined this term myself, so please don't go around saying it's a uterine adaptogen, because it's not a common term. But I'm sure you get the gist of it, is that it regulates depending on what you need. If you need the blood supply, it will bring it in. If you need to cut off the blood supply, it will bring that in as well. I've had a client once who had a lot of pain in her ovaries. And just by doing the red raspberry leaf tea, combined with a couple of other herbs, but that was the main herb she was using, the pain went away literally within 3 days. So this is an absolutely wonderful herb, but because it's highly astringent, there is going to be another herb that we're going to be using in order to rebalance it. And in the recipe, you guys have marshmallow leaf. I'm gonna play around a little bit with something a little different, because the reason why we use marshmallow leaf is because it is highly moistening. Okay, so the tricks about the beauty and the art of formulating teas is that when you have something that's highly astringent, you want to add something also that's highly moistening so that you balance things out. If you become too dry on the inside, your skin starts feeling really dry. You might start feeling like you might start getting constipated. So a little bit of astringent is okay, especially if you live in places like Colorado, for example, where it's already very dry. Then we definitely want to be rebalancing things with something that's moistening. So you can either use marshmallow leaf or you can use plantain leaf, both of them similar properties. Again, as a 1/4 cup. So I'm using a very generous one. It's like a 1/4 and a half of a 1/4. So that's 3/4 cup really. Okay. The other ingredient, so let's see if you guys have any, if anybody posted anything on nettles. I can't see it on Instagram, and so I'm gonna revisit the comments later, but basically, let me just, for those of you who don't know, stinging nettles have really just one of the super herbs, if you will, that can help so much with everything from women report feeling, well, there's actually studies showing a lessening of osteoporosis, reductions of hot flashes, strengthening of bones. So osteoporosis, I guess, is connected. It has an affinity for the heart. It lowers blood pressure. It is also, it's supposed to be a neutral herb, which means it's not going to cool you down too much. I feel like it's a little bit cooling, so I tend to combine it with other warming herbs in order to balance things out. And again, stinging nettles are incredibly rich in all the micronutrients that I talked about, as well as trace minerals, and so that's exactly what we want. And then what we're gonna do next is we have peppermint. Now, if you love peppermint, or it could also be spearmint, by the way, this is a huge digestive aid. Okay, so like, you know how you do peppermint after having dinner, especially if you have a little bit of digestive issues, that really helps a lot. You can use spearmint the same way. I'll be honest with you, I don't particularly like peppermint, so in the recipe we're asking for a 1/4 cup. I'm gonna use like less than that, just because I'm just not a fan of peppermint. Peppermint is stronger than spearmint. It contains more of the essential oils than spearmint does, and for that reason you can use a little bit more spearmint liberally if you like that. Let's see, and then we have 1 tablespoon of licorice root, and I ran out of licorice root, so I'm not gonna be adding that. That's okay. If you have that, then you can easily add that in. But what I am gonna replace though is I'm gonna add one more herb that has become kind of my favorite, and that's red clover blossoms. Who here knows about what's good about red clover blossoms? And they literally, just gonna show you how they look. I'm gonna do a little bit zoom in on, says this way, no, this way, okay. So hopefully you can see my hand. It's literally, you've got these beautiful blossoms of red clover, okay? And and so this comes with the blossoms as well as the leaves. So you have a combination of these two. And I got mine from Frontier as well. All of those are organic. I don't see a reason why I should be consuming anything that's not organic. So, you know, with herbs, the funny thing is that, like, if you develop kind of like a relationship with them, you know, it's like the same way you have it with food, where certain foods you have this aversion towards, and there's other foods you're just so drawn towards. Of course, unless it's like dairy, processed foods, or sugar, probably not the best combination. But otherwise, it's a really good thing to listen to these signals. And I have a huge affinity, like I'm very drawn towards certain herbs, and I'm developing that kind of intuition where sometimes, you know, we have definitely the left brain of using a lot of the science. What's the science behind it? That's a lot of my schooling is based on that. But one of the things I really appreciate about the course is the fact that you learn also the other side of things, and that's developing a relationship and intuition to certain things. The same way, you know, like if you say during a period, you suddenly have a real craving towards having a steak, right? That's your body telling you, dude, I need some iron here from you, right? You know? So that's, and I was, so, and the same thing I apply with herbs. So I just boiled the water, and, you know, again, I'm kind of eyeballing a lot of things here, but if you follow the recipe closely, it's basically a quart and what is it, and a cup or half a cup or something. Yeah, a quart and a half a cup. And I'm using a little bit more here because I just go through it so quickly. What we want to be doing is we're going to be infusing this tea for, you want to do minimum of 3 hours, and the longest you probably want to do is like between 8 to 10 hours. I wouldn't do more than that. Oftentimes I do it in the evening, and I wake up in the morning and I just and then get to it. So the next step would be, I'm not going to strain it right now, right? Because I want it to be infused. And this is what I'm talking about, the truly medicinal value of a tea, you know, versus just dipping a tea bag in your tea. It has certain benefits, but it's not going to be as nutrient rich and beneficial medicinally, as this. So as you can see, we're getting this thick concoction. It's not a concoction, it's infusion. Or it can be a concoction. It's not a decoction, that's for sure. Okay. And I'm just gonna cover it and leave it on a counter for like I said, several hours. And the next thing is really simple. You strain it. Once you strain it, by the way, you can strain it using obviously a regular strainer, but what I found really helpful to use are these nut bags, because that way there is so much of good stuff that's going to be in the herbs that you want to squeeze it all out, right? And then get the most nutrients out of it. So that's basically it. And once you strain it, you want to keep it in the fridge right away and consume it within 3 to 4 days. After that, basically the tea, it begins to lose its medicinal value, okay? And if you really feel, here's the thing also I want to just mention before we wrap up today's call, is that, you know, be mindful of teas like that in terms of, this is not your magic bullet formula where you drink it and like within an hour, you're just like, woo, Superman, got so much power, I can't believe it, you know? It's not coffee, you're not drinking coffee. The purpose of nutritive tea, same as with good nutrition, is to do a little bit every day consistently, and then within probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks perhaps, you start feeling like almost like this flushing of nutrients that's going through your body. It's just quite a wonderful feeling. And I've been doing this now for, I want to say, probably 2 months, ever since I learned that recipe and committed to it, so much so that if you're joining late, I was showing earlier, this is basically, I pre-mix everything, so I don't have to repeat the process every single time. That will probably last me for a month and a half or so, and then I use what I need. And but don't do a big batch first, do a small batch so that you can see what herbs you like, what you don't like. You know, maybe you realize like peppermint is really my thing, I need more of that, right? Great, add it in. Or you realize, ooh, licorice is really, you know. Just one word of caution, licorice does have a tendency to bring up your blood pressure. So if you're on blood pressure, if you have high blood pressure, you want to definitely avoid it or just reduce the dose significantly. And it doesn't, so, but what it does is like if you have normal blood pressure, it's not gonna elevate it and keep it there. It's gonna elevate it slightly and then bring it back to normal soon after that. Okay. So I hope today's video was helpful, and what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna hang up and I'm gonna do another call, another video that's gonna talk about the 7 things that should not be in your multivitamins and what depleted our soil and what is the option for a multivitamin if you're looking for one. All right, everyone, have a lovely weekend and possibly see you in the next video.